Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Jenny and I've been doing a carnivore diet experiment since December 2022. In today's video, I wanted to compare my blood work from 1 month of strict carnivore to 1 month of dirty carnivore. There were some really interesting changes and I was a bit surprised at some of the numbers. First, we'll talk about what I ate and drank and the exercise that I did for each of the months, and then we're going to dive into the blood work numbers, finishing up with my thoughts and interpretations of the numbers. Disclaimer that I am not a doctor, so do not take any of this as personal medical advice. I've listed out my references in the description below if you're interested in learning more. I'm just a person that's very curious, I read a lot, and I like to run dietary experiments on myself and share the results with you. A little background, I had already been on the carnivore diet for 7 months when I started my 1 month of strict carnivore, which for me was BBB and E. For the entire month of August 2023, I only consumed beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. As far as beverages, I would have plain water, sometimes with added electrolytes, sparkling water, and black decaf coffee. As far as exercises, I did 22 workouts in the month of August. 19 of those were walks and 3 were strength training sessions. Apple Watch says that I burned 4,100 calories over 17 hours of workout time. And I did the sauna 5 times. I got my blood work done on day 1 of BBB and E and day 30. I will link that full results video at the end if you're interested in that. Then for the month of September, I did dirty carnivore. Some would even consider this keto or meat-based some of the days. I ate beef, pork, seafood, eggs, butter, chicken wings, a lot of dairy, which I don't typically include in my regular version of the carnivore diet because it slows down my weight loss progression. I think I had dairy 6 times in September. I also had a lot of artificial sweeteners. In the first half of September, I drank a sleeve of Sprite Zeros, which is a 12-pack, a sleeve of caffeine-free Coke Zeros. I also made my beef tallow chocolate crunch bars twice, and there is Swerve in that recipe. In addition to that, I had 4 of those mini sugar-free Reese's peanut butter cups and 3 keto ice cream bars. I find that when I consume artificial sweeteners in any form, it makes me eat more food and it makes me crave carbs more, specifically like high sugar, ultra-processed carbs. So I cut the artificial sweeteners after the first 2 weeks of September, and the rest of the month I did normal carnivore, but I did eat some vegetables. I think I had 5 instances in the month of September where I consumed vegetables. I ate 2 jars of Ivar, which is this red pepper, like a preserved red pepper dish that my mother-in-law makes. I had cabbage salad, a tomato feta cucumber salad, some kimchi, and some sauerkraut. And then I had 2 high-carb, high-sugar items. I had this really delicious homemade cream puff from the Serbian restaurant we went to the last weekend in September. And then I had my planned cheat meal, which was 3 apple cider donuts from the apple orchard. So as far as beverages for the month, I had 1 shot of rakia, which is like a Serbian brandy or moonshine. That was the only alcohol I had for the month. Like I said, the Sprite Zeros, the Coke Zeros, and then my usual, which is just plain water, sometimes with added electrolytes, sparkling water, and black decaf coffee. As far as exercise, I did 18 workouts in the month of September. 1 was an elliptical sprint, 1 was an outdoor cycling, and 1 was a strength training session, and the remaining 15 were walks. Apple Watch says that I burned 2,400 calories over 10 hours of exercise in the month of September, and I did the sauna 8 times. So food-wise, in August, very strict. September, very dirty, very lazy. Out of the 30 days of September, I would say that 14 of those days were full carnivore. 14 of those days were like a dirty carnivore, some days even like a keto or a meat-based. And then 2 of those days are the days that I ate the high sugar, high carb items. So those would be more considered like a low carb day. I think I kept my carbs under 100 grams on both of those days. I also ate a lot more food volume-wise in September. And I think that was influenced by the amount of artificial sweeteners that I consumed in that first half of the month, and I think that stimulated my appetite. I also think that stress played a huge role in how much food I ate in the month of September. As far as workouts, I worked out for longer periods of time in August, 17 hours of time as opposed to 10 hours. And I burned double the amount of calories according to the Apple Watch. As far as my sauna sessions, that was pretty much equal, 5 and 8 respectively. For weight loss, I lost 6.6 pounds in August and 2 pounds in September. But what will my blood work look like between the 2 months? Well, very interesting to say the least. Before we get into the blood work though, if you're enjoying this video, if you could give it a like, and if you'd like to take your support a bit further, I just launched a channel membership. Head to the link in the description of this video to go over to the channel membership portal where you can see all of the benefits of becoming a channel member. And as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button for a free and easy way to support this channel. Let's go over the blood work numbers. We are going to be comparing a standard lipid panel, an advanced lipid particle size test, some blood sugar markers, and some inflammation markers. I'm going to go through all the numbers first without any interpretation, and then we'll go back through and talk about each section. Also, if you're interested in any of these blood tests, you can check out the description below. I've listed out where I purchased each of these tests and how much I paid. So let's start with the standard lipid panel. My total cholesterol went from 246 to 218. My LDL cholesterol went from a 164 to a 136. Triglycerides went from 64 to 46. HDL-C went from a 71 to a 74. The ApoA and the ApoB are not on a standard lipid panel. I ordered these as separate tests. ApoA went from a 156 to a 200. ApoB went from 100 to 89. Next, let's move into the results of my lipid particle size test. This is a more advanced cholesterol test, and what it's doing is measuring the size and buoyancy of my lipoproteins. So first, my LDL particle number went from 1826 to 1280. My small dense LDL particles went from a 239 to a 123. My LDL particle size stayed almost exactly the same from a 22.1 to a 22.0, and I remained in the A pattern. Next, let's go through some blood sugar markers. My A1C went from a 5.4 to a 5.5. My fasting glucose went from 92 to 97. My fasting insulin went from a 5.5 to a 4.8. And finally, there's one more blood sugar marker that comes with the lipid particle size test. It's called an LPIR score. It's just measuring your insulin resistance based on the health of your lipoproteins. And I remained very insulin sensitive for both months. Finally, let's talk about some inflammation numbers. For HSCRP, I went from a 0.37 to a 0.78. Ferritin, I went from 136 to 98. And my vitamin D levels went from a 47.2 to a 50.3. First, let's go back and talk about the big drops in my cholesterol numbers. My total and LDL cholesterol as well as my triglycerides dropped drastically while I saw a slight increase in my HDL cholesterol. My total LDL particle number went down drastically as well with a corresponding drop in my small dense LDL particles. I remained in the A pattern. My LDL particle size stayed almost exactly the same. My ApoA went up and my ApoB went down. So why did all of this happen to my cholesterol numbers? Was it just that I ate some carbs in the month of September and that caused all my cholesterol numbers to drop? Well, that may be a part of it. It's well known that if you eat more plant foods, you can see your cholesterol numbers go down. I know a lot of vegans out there like to, brag on their super low LDL cholesterol numbers, but I think that something else is going on here. You see, blood cholesterol levels are only influenced by diet by so much. Only about 25% of your total cholesterol levels come from your food. The rest is manufactured by your body. What I think is going on is that last weekend in September, I ate a lot of food, like way more than normal. That weekend, I was averaging 2,500 to 3,000 calories per day. And once I got my blood work numbers back, I had some time to mull over the numbers a little bit. I realized that I inadvertently did the Feldman Protocol the weekend before the blood test. So here's the gist of the Feldman Protocol. You eat very high calorie and very high fat 3 days before you take a standard cholesterol test, and you will see all of your numbers drop, and you'll see the rise in HDL. I'll put this graphic up on the screen. This is called the broken ladder. So Dave Feldman discovered this when he was doing a bunch of blood tests on himself. He saw this pattern. He had a bunch of other people try it. And now, of all the people that have tried it and reported back, it's about 85% accurate that this happens when you have a very, very, very high calorie 3-day period and then you take your blood test. So you can see that total cholesterol, LDL particle number, small dense LDL particles, and triglycerides all drop and you can see there's a rise in HDL. All right, so now let's take a look at my cholesterol numbers again, and you can see that that exact same thing happened to all of my numbers. Large drops in total cholesterol, LDL particle number, the number of small dense LDL particles that are a part of that particle number, and a big drop in my triglycerides, and you can see I also had the rise in HDL cholesterol. My cholesterol numbers from this test follow the broken ladder perfectly. So that's what I think happened with my cholesterol numbers. I inadvertently did a Feldman Protocol that last weekend, and it did a lot. Maybe there was some movement from the carbs that I ate as well, but it just matches so perfectly with the broken ladder that I am pretty sure that that is why the numbers look this way. So there's a theory as to why total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol tend to rise on a ketogenic diet. It's called the Lipid energy model. This is something that Dave Feldman and his team came up with. And while it's just a theory, it is being tested as we speak. I think it makes a lot of sense. So let me just break it down really quickly for you. So first, when you eat any kind of food, a lipoprotein called a chylomicron is going to be delivering the energy from that food to your cells. It's the first delivery truck, and it delivers all of its energy within 30 to 60 minutes. And then it dissipates. Chylomicrons do not hang around the system. LDL particles, on the other hand, they emerge later. They come out around the 12 to 14 hour mark, and they can hang around for a couple of days. LDL particles serve dual purposes as a delivery truck and as a maintenance vehicle. They can deliver energy in the form of triglycerides and cholesterol, but they also aid in immunity, in delivering fat-soluble vitamins such as A, D, E, and K, and they help synthesize hormones, among a plethora of other things. Now, when you're eating a higher carb diet, you tend to eat more often. When the body is in a constantly fed state, there aren't going to be as many LDL particles because they aren't as needed for delivering energy. When you're constantly eating, and I mean a meal every few hours, which is how most people eat, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a few snacks thrown in between. The longest fasting period is when you're sleeping. That's how most people eat. And when you're constantly supplying your body with fuel, your body is going to use that fuel first. And if you're consuming any kind of carbs, those break down into glucose, which is a form of energy that the body can use very, very easily, and it's used first. Now, let's say, on the other hand, that you're eating a ketogenic or a very, very low carb diet. You're not getting those constant hits of glucose from your diet because you're not eating very many carbs, or in my case, really any carbs at all. Typically eating less. I know for me on the carnivore diet, I'm eating 2 meals per day. There's a tighter feeding window. You're eating more of your meals within, like a 6 or an 8 hour period. You have longer fasting times between that last meal and that first meal. So more of your energy is going to be coming from your adipose tissue or your fat storage, the storage on your body. In this situation, LDL particles tend to ramp up because they are needed to deliver all of that energy from your adipose tissue, from your fat cells, to the rest of the cells in your body. And you can see this in my numbers that we just discussed. I had an abundance of energy coming in from food, so I had a corresponding drop in my LDL particles, and therefore my LDL cholesterol, my total cholesterol, triglycerides, so on and so forth. That's the lipid energy model in a gist, very, very, very simplified. I have a bunch of videos in the description below if you're interested in learning more. And of course, that's just a theory, but Feldman and his team are in the process of conducting studies to try to learn more. So that brings us to my blood glucose numbers. As one would expect, they were a little bit higher than usual, though not unreasonably high. My A1C going from 5.4 to a 5.5, glucose 92 to a 97, and fasting insulin went from a 5.5 to a 4.8. I think my fasting glucose was a little bit higher due to a few factors that are pretty easy to identify. First, I'd had a cream puff and some apple cider donuts the weekend before this blood test. I also had eaten a shit ton of food the weekend before the blood test. My calories, 2,500 to 3,000 calories per day, were a lot higher than I normally consume. And glucose levels, fasting glucose just equals stored energy in your blood. So it makes sense that I'd had some really high carb, high sugar items and a lot of food in general, that I'd have slightly higher fasting glucose. I'm wondering for the A1C going from a 5.4 to a 5.5, if that was influenced also by the artificial sweeteners that I had in the first half of September. Now, A1C is a measure of your fasting glucose over the previous 3 months, but it is weighted more heavily towards your most recent month and your most recent week. So it makes sense that it went up a little bit. It's not something that I haven't seen before, and it's still not, in a pre-diabetic level. So I'm not super worried about it, but it is really interesting to see that it did go up slightly. I also exercised less in September, and exercise is an excellent way to get rid of glucose stores and to help regulate your fasting glucose, your fasting insulin, and your A1C. My fasting insulin looked good, went from a 5.5 to a 4.8. I've seen levels anywhere between a 2.7 up to, I think, a 6.5. That's pretty much the range that I see for my insulin levels, so that was looking good. One more thing that I thought about as I was writing the script for this video is that the morning of the blood test, the second blood test, it's very hard to get blood out of me. It's like getting blood from a turnip. So I drank a ton of water, but I also took a 2-mile walk before we went to the LabCorp blood center, blood testing center, whatever you want to call it. And it is known, and I see this in my continuous glucose monitor data all the time, that exercise can raise your blood glucose levels. So perhaps that had something to do with it. I got done with my walk at 8:06 a.m. and I think we took blood at 8:45 or 9 a.m. So yeah, I think that might have made a difference too. Finally, let's move into the inflammation numbers. I only did 3 tests here, and everything looks pretty good in my opinion. There was a little bit of movement with the HSCRP 0.37 to 0.78, but the 0.78 is still good. You want that to be under 1, and I've seen that level before, so I don't know that that's like more inflammation or anything like that. It's still really good. The ferritin, 136 to 98, those are looking good, not too low, not too high, right in that perfect range. And then my vitamin D went up a few points, which is good. I've been supplementing with 10,000 milligrams of vitamin D and also K2. I live in the Chicagoland area, and it's already started to get like really gray skies, kind of gloomy and rainy. And, the sun is just not the same as it is in the summer. So I was very happy to see that my vitamin D levels went from a 47.2 to a 50.3. Now, the reason I put vitamin D under the inflammation numbers is because if you have very low vitamin D levels, that is indicative of an inflamed state. So that is a number that can be used to measure for chronic inflammation. So all in all, I think everything is looking pretty good for the inflammation numbers. So what did I learn doing a month of strict carnivore and then a month of dirty carnivore? Well, I definitely reinforced the fact that I'm very sensitive to artificial sweeteners. I think it'd be cool to run an experiment to test out all of the different artificial sweeteners that are out there and see which ones give me an insulin response and which ones cause carb cravings, if it's all of them or if it's just certain ones. I think that would be a really interesting experiment. I also learned the Feldman Protocol is real. My cholesterol numbers followed the broken ladder perfectly, and it was really, really interesting to see that in action. I also learned that I really need to keep up with my exercise levels, and I need to work on stress. Stress relief, as always. I feel like we all, kind of suck at dealing with stress. I did better this year than last year for sure, but I still have some work to do in that arena. So what's next? I was really inconsistent on the carnivore diet for the first 2 weeks of October. I'm gonna link that video right here where I talk about how crappy it made me feel. I started back on normal carnivore, strict carnivore on Wednesday, October 18th, and I plan on staying strict until Thanksgiving. I'm getting my blood work done again the day before Thanksgiving so we can see how going from dirty carnivore to strict carnivore, going in the opposite direction, how that's going to affect my blood work numbers. I'm really interested. Is my glucose going to improve? Is my A1C going to go back down? Will my total cholesterol, my LDL cholesterol, all of those numbers start to go back up if I'm on strict carnivore? I think it's gonna be really interesting to see. I don't quite know the answer to that question, so we're gonna find out, and I'll have that video for you in early December. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.